Well, one program that there's not a lot of hype around right now is Nebraska. And Nebraska at Ohio State is the subject of the Super Six. It's sponsored by DraftKings. We'll have the column coming out later in the week. And one of the questions will be, and this will be a very difficult question to answer, I'm quite sure, what will the outcome be of the Nebraska-Ohio State game? I believe pain is an option. That is a correct answer. That was just a complete embarrassment from Nebraska last week. They were beat up on every facet of the game by Indiana. They looked slow and terrible on defense. They could not protect against Indiana. It was a bad beat all around. 25.5 point dog, total around 48.5. Huskers now have lost 26 straight games against ranked opponents. And Geoff, I don't think that streak is in jeopardy of coming to an end this week.
No, we'll talk about this more with my best bet, but I'll keep it simple. I think Ohio State sort of names their score. They're off a bye. They're angry. They're upset about the loss to Oregon. And Nebraska, look, defensively, I was sort of shocked at that game against Indiana. Offensively, I've not been surprised to see, they play with a true freshman quarterback. It's hard to play as a young cat, and you see with teams getting more film on them, they're scoring less and less, right? It was 14 points against Rutgers. It was 7 against Indiana, off a bye, mind you. They were off a bye. Sammy scored 7 points. I think Ohio State names their score in this game. It's somewhere, I don't know, 49-10. I think it's just a drubbing by Ohio State.
So he's not the next Mahomes? Is that comparison over? Remember after week 2, it's like, oh, he wears the same number. He's got the same hair, the same glasses. You said 49-10. I was thinking, can Ohio State get to the total by itself? And clearly you think, yes, they're not going to slow down either. They're going to just keep moving the ball.
Yep.
I think over is actually not a bad idea at 48. They did knock it down a little bit. Off the 49 opener down to 48. I think Ohio State could easily get to 42. And then at that point, you need a touchdown from Nebraska. Lean over, at least on a Wednesday. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, he's Mahomes, but bigger. That was the cool quote from somebody. I like Ohio State team total over 35.5 for all the reasons Sammy mentioned. They can name their score. You don't have to worry about, backdoor covers or whatever from Nebraska. To me, Ohio State getting their 38, 42 plus points, I think is the way to play it. Like minus 130, 135 here at DraftKings. Over 35.5 team total for Ohio State over.
Geoff, I'm going to ask you, there was so much coming out of the Oregon game about Ohio State and their lack of pressure and defense and how they could not, they were very passive and weren't aggressive. Like, what do you make? Did you notice that as a player? Like did you see them maybe doing something differently or should be doing something differently from what they normally do? Because I mean, there are numbers out there about like in their last 4 games against like top 10 opponents or something, they only have like 2 sacks. So is that something that the Ohio State defense is doing differently when they play top competition as opposed to lesser like this week? Do you expect to see Ohio State blitzing and bringing it from all over the place, or do you expect to see what we saw in Eugene a couple weeks back?
It's a good question because Ryan Day was asked about this yesterday in between complaining about the Big Ten officiating in the Oregon game. And he mentioned that there's like, it sounded like there's some discomfort, right, with him and sort of the defensive staff and even Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach. There was talk about Larry Johnson and the D coordinator sort of butting heads on how to do things as well, which isn't great to be a top caliber team like this and have sort of some strife between your defensive line coach, your D coordinator. So I think the problem for them with their defensive line, and I mentioned this heading into the Oregon game, their defense is not a very disguised defense, right? Because they have better players than almost everyone else. They just sit in a coverage, or if they're going to show pressure, it's very obvious to see, and they're just better than you, right? So they play faster than you. They have better players than you. But when you play an offensive line like Oregon, or in the games you mentioned, right, against these better teams that have offensive lines that can block your guys, well, then those one-on-one matchups become more important, and you're not getting home because they're not as good as maybe the offensive lines they're playing. And also their body types, like they're not the Bosa type pass rusher they've had in the past. They're bigger body types. And when you play bigger, stronger offensive linemen who can sort of get in the way, that's where you have a matchup advantage for the offensive lineman. So I would imagine that it's not Bear bringing extra pressure. It's finding ways to move those guys around line games, because they really don't stunt at all. They don't run games. They don't like do exotic stuff up front, because in 95% of the games they play, they're just better than everyone else. And the games they don't, or the Oregon game, right, is when they struggle. So I think we'll look to maybe see their defensive line more active post-snap. I don't think they're just automatically bring pressure, especially against this young quarterback. Just sit back in zone and let him make some mistakes. But there is probably, like Ryan Day's talked about this, they're talking about it. They got to find ways to generate pressure against these better teams.
And one of the, obviously the better team, we're talking about Oregon playing a home game as the number 1 ranked team in the nation this week, hosting Illinois, who got that upset win over Michigan a week ago.
Isn't it an upset though? Michigan, Michigan is, we can say this for maybe later. Michigan, Bear. Like I watched the film of this game just to sort of get a sense of what Illinois is.
Steal someone else's quote.
It's hard to put into words how bad the quarterback play is at Michigan this season. Like it made me hurt physically watching the film. I mean, there was a play where I know they called pass interference on one, or like a holding on the other side, but
Bear Bets full episodes drop twice a week right here on the Bear Bets YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to stay ahead of the odds, and let's celebrate all of our wins together.